Picture this. It is a warm evening in 1828, the heart of Zulu land. Shaka Zulu, the mighty Zulu king, is in his kraal at Dukuza. He has reigned as the most feared and respected warrior in southern Africa. His armies have thundered across the land, his name whispered in awe and fear. But on this night, destiny takes a darker turn. Shaka does not know it yet, but the man standing closest to him, his trusted servant, Mbopha kaSithayi, has made a fateful choice. He has conspired with Shaka's half-brothers, Dingane and Mushlangana, to end the king's life. As Shaka speaks of his visions for the future, perhaps of new wars, perhaps of reforms, Mbopa gives a signal. Warriors close in. Spears flash. The mighty Shaka stumbles, betrayed not by enemies on the battlefield, but by those he trusted most. It is a moment that would alter the course of Zulu history forever. And at the center of it all stands Mbopa, the man remembered not as a general, not as a hero, but as the betrayer. But who was Mbopha kaSithayi? Why did he turn against the king he had served? Was he a coward, a traitor, or simply a man caught between fear and survival? Tonight we uncover the story of betrayal, ambition, and the downfall of a legend. Before we dive in, if the rise and fall of kings fascinates you, make sure to like this video and help it reach more history lovers. Subscribe and join us as we uncover more untold stories of the past. And share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice keeps history alive. Before we can understand Mbopha's betrayal, we must understand the man he betrayed. Shaka Zulu was born in 1787, the illegitimate son of Senzangakona, chief of the Zulu, and Nundi, his mother. His early years were marked by hardship, rejection, and exile. Shaka grew up hardened by bullying and humiliation, but within him burned a fire that could not be extinguished. When he came of age, Shaka joined the Mthethwa, a dominant confederation of clans in southeastern Africa led by Chief Dingiswayo, a progressive ruler who valued both strategy and diplomacy. There, his brilliance as a warrior was quickly recognized. Shaka was not merely a soldier, he was a revolutionary. He reimagined the art of war, reshaping the very foundations of Zulu society. He replaced the throwing spear with the short stabbing spear, the Iklawa, forcing warriors into brutal, close combat. He invented new battle formations, like the buffalo horns, designed to encircle and crush his enemies. By the time Shaka ascended as King of the Zulu in 1816, he had already laid the foundation for one of the most formidable militaries in African history. The Zulu Kingdom expanded rapidly under his leadership. Clan after clan was absorbed or destroyed. Shaka's reign brought order, discipline, and power, but also rivers of blood. Entire regions were depopulated. Refugees scattered across southern Africa in a movement historians later called the Umfakane, the scattering. By the 1820s, Shaka was more than a king. He was a legend, a man feared by his enemies and respected by his followers. His empire stretched from the Indian Ocean inland, and he dreamed of even greater things. Shaka was not only a warrior, he was a ruler with vision. He introduced military discipline into every corner of society. Men were organized into Amabutho regiments. Even women were grouped by age sets. He demanded absolute loyalty. But brilliance often walked hand in hand with brutality. Shaka ruled through fear. Dissenters were executed, rivals eliminated. When his mother, Nandi, died in 1827, his grief consumed him. Shaka ordered a period of mourning so extreme it shocked even his closest advisors. No crops were to be planted that year. Pregnant women were put to death, for no child could be born while the king mourned. Thousands of people were executed for failing to display sufficient grief. What had begun as a kingdom of order and strength now teetered on the edge of tyranny. Whispers began to spread. Had Shaka lost his mind? Was the great king now a danger to his own people? And among those whispers was the name Mbopha kaSithayi, the man who would turn whispers into daggers. Mbopha kaSithayi is a shadowy figure in history. Unlike Shaka, whose every move was etched into legend, Mbopha is remembered for only one act: betrayal. But behind that single act lies the story of a man shaped by his family, his clan, and the violent world of early 19th century Zululand. Mbopha was the son of Sithayi, a man of no great chieftainship, but one whose family held a position of respect within the Zulu clan. They were not aristocrats with vast herds of cattle, nor warriors renowned across the valleys, but they carried something equally valuable: loyalty and service to the royal line. For families like the Sithayi, honor came from proving themselves in war and in devotion to their leader. From a young age, boys were raised to fight, to obey, and to dream of earning a place among the warriors who defined Zulu manhood. It was in this environment that Mbopha grew up. He would have been trained from childhood in the arts of survival, hunting with spears, running long distances to build endurance, practicing drills with boys of his age group. In Zulu society, every boy's path led toward the army, and for those who displayed not just strength, but intelligence, discipline, and courage, there was the chance to rise further. By the time Shaka Zulu began building his empire, the regimental system, the Amabutho, was already transforming the lives of young men. They no longer belonged only to their clans, but to the kingdom. Service was compulsory, and the best warriors could expect advancement. Mbopha distinguished himself not only by his ability with the spear, but also by his sharp mind and his ability to read the moods of leaders. Where other men only fought, Mbopha watched, listened, and learned. It was this combination of loyalty and cleverness that eventually drew him into Shaka's inner household. Rising from the ranks, he became an Induna, a commander and advisor. This was no small achievement. To be an Induna meant Shaka trusted you, not just to lead men in battle, but to carry out his orders, even when they involved life and death decisions. Mbopha's position brought him close to the beating heart of power. He stood among those who guarded the king, interpreted his wishes, and ensured his commands were obeyed. To stand so close to Shaka was both an honor and a burden. Mbopha witnessed the king's genius firsthand, but he also saw his growing cruelty. Imagine being Mbopha, every day, watching Shaka order executions, impose impossible demands, and punish those who failed him. At any moment, Mbopha himself could have fallen victim to Shaka's wrath. Some historians suggest Mbopha was motivated by fear, others by ambition. Perhaps he simply read the winds of change and realized that Shaka's reign was collapsing. Perhaps he hoped that by siding with Dingane and Malangana, Shaka's brothers, he could secure his own survival. But one thing is certain. Mbopha played the role of the instigator. He is remembered in oral tradition as the one who whispered to Shaka's brothers, urging them to act before Shaka destroyed them all. Mbopha was not just a follower of the plot, he was the spark. By late 1828, Zululand was restless. Shaka's harsh decrees after Nandi's death had alienated many. His warriors were weary of endless campaigns. His people were hungry. Into this storm stepped Dingane and Mushlangana, Shaka's half-brothers. Both had long resented Shaka's rule, but neither dared to confront him directly. Shaka's reputation was too powerful, his aura of invincibility too great. But who were these men? Dingane kaSithayi was one of the elder sons of Senzangakona, born of a different mother than Shaka. He was not known as a brilliant warrior, but he was cunning, politically astute, and patient. Dingain had grown up in the shadow of Shaka's meteoric rise, watching as his half-brother transformed from an illegitimate outcast into the supreme ruler of the Zulu. While Shaka earned fame on the battlefield, Dingain cultivated his own survival skills in the dangerous politics of the royal household. He lacked Shaka's charisma, but he possessed a calculating mind, one that understood the value of waiting for the right moment. Mushlangana, another of Shaka's half-brothers, was less prominent than Dingain, but equally ambitious. He too carried the blood of Senzangakona, and thus had a legitimate claim to the throne. Where Dingain was cautious, Mushlangana was more restless, willing to take risks. He had long been frustrated by Shaka's dominance, yet he never found the courage to openly challenge him. Like Dingain, he feared what would happen if he hesitated too long, for Shaka had shown no mercy toward rivals, even those within his own family. Both brothers shared a dangerous truth. As long as Shaka lived, their own lives were precarious. Shaka had executed other siblings before, and his unpredictable wrath meant that even royal blood offered little protection. This is where Mbopha entered the story. Unlike the brothers, who hesitated in fear of Shaka's strength, Mbopha saw what they could not. Shaka was vulnerable. His grip on power, though still formidable, was no longer unbreakable. So Mbopha whispered to Dingain and Mushlangana. He told them the time had come. He assured them that the people would support a change. He promised that Shaka, distracted and increasingly unstable, could be taken by surprise. The brothers hesitated. After all, Shaka was a warrior who had survived countless battles, but Mbopha was relentless. He reminded them of the executions, the madness, the endless mourning. If Shaka lived, he warned, they too would surely die. Finally, Dingain and Mushlangana agreed. The plot was set. It was September 1828 at Dukuza, Shaka's royal homestead. The sun had begun to set, painting the sky in hues of red and gold, as if the heavens themselves foreshadowed the blood that would soon be spilled. Inside the royal kraal, Shaka was in conversation with his attendants, speaking of future campaigns. His mind, restless as always, roamed far beyond Zululand. Some accounts suggest he even dreamed of sending emissaries north, perhaps to expand the reach of his kingdom across the continent. Unbeknownst to him, his fate was already sealed. Among those present was Mbopha kaSithayi, ever close to the king. His expression was calm, almost unreadable, but behind that mask lay the storm of a man who had already chosen treachery. He had whispered, he had plotted, and now the moment of action had arrived. At Mbopha's discreet signal, Dingane and Mflangana entered with a group of armed warriors. Their steps were deliberate, their faces grim. To anyone else it might have seemed routine, the king's brothers paying a visit, but Shaka, if he noticed, gave no sign. Accounts differ on what happened next. Some say Mbopha approached the king with respectful words, distracting him, keeping his attention fixed until the assassins were close enough to strike. Others claim it was Mbopha himself who made the first move, thrusting his spear into Shaka's side in a sudden act of violence. What is clear is that chaos erupted in an instant. Spears were raised, bodies surged forward. Shaka, despite the treachery, did not fall quietly. Even wounded, he fought with the ferocity that had defined his reign. He tried to parry, tried to strike back, but the betrayal had surrounded him. He was one man against many, and this time, even the great Shaka Zulu could not overcome the odds. The soil of Dukuza was stained with his lifeblood as he staggered under the blows. His final words, preserved in legend, were chilling. "Are you killing me, brothers? You think you will rule. You are stirring up the hornets." With those words, Shaka Zulu, the warrior, the king, the legend, was no more. And standing over the fallen giant was Mbopha kaSithayi, the whisperer turned betrayer, the man whose signal had ended the reign of one of Africa's greatest rulers. With Shaka dead, Dingane seized power. He proclaimed himself king of the Zulu. At first, many rejoiced. The terror of Shaka's mourning decrees was over. Perhaps now there would be peace. But history has a cruel sense of irony. Dingane proved little better than Shaka. His reign was marked by paranoia, cruelty, and ultimately disaster when he clashed with the Voortrekkers at Blood River in 1838. For a moment, Mbopha may have believed he had chosen wisely. He had helped remove a tyrant. He stood close to the new king. For a time, Mbopha lived well under the new order. In the immediate aftermath of Shaka's assassination, Dingane rewarded him with favor and recognition. After all, without Mbopha's courage to plot and his insistence on action, the brothers might never have found the resolve to strike. For a brief moment, it seemed that Mbopha's gamble had paid off. He had survived the wrath of Shaka and placed himself close to the ear of the new king. But whispers began to grow, as whispers always do. The people remembered that Mbopha had once whispered against Shaka. Would he not whisper again? This time, against Dingane? His reputation as the betrayer became a shadow that followed him everywhere. Dingane himself began to wonder, if Mbopha had turned against the most feared king in Zulu history, what would stop him from turning against anyone? To Dingane, Mbopha was both useful and dangerous. He had been the spark that lit the fire of conspiracy, but fire, once unleashed, is difficult to control. A man who had betrayed one king could easily betray another. Loyalty built on ambition was never secure. And so, it did not take long for suspicion to outweigh gratitude. Mbopha's fate was sealed not by what he did after Shaka's death, but by what he had already done. His act of betrayal, though successful, had marked him forever as untrustworthy. Accounts of his end vary, but most oral traditions agree. Mbopha was executed on Dingane's orders. Perhaps it was swift, perhaps public, a warning carved into memory that betrayal carries its own price. The man who betrayed Shaka Zulu had, in the end, betrayed himself. Today, Mbopha kaSithayi is remembered not as a leader, not as a warrior, but as a traitor. His name lives in the shadows of Shaka's legend. Yet his story raises deep questions. Was he truly a villain, or simply a man trapped in the storm of history? Shaka's rule had grown unbearable. Perhaps Mbopha acted to save the Zulu from destruction. Perhaps he believed Dingane would be a better ruler. But history is rarely kind to betrayers. From Judas Iscariot to Brutus, those who strike from the shadows are condemned, even when their motives are complex. Mbopha kaSithayi stands in that long, dark tradition. Without him, Shaka might have lived longer, perhaps expanded the Zulu Kingdom even further, or perhaps his tyranny would have destroyed it from within. We cannot know. What we do know is that the Zulu Kingdom changed forever on that night in 1828, and it was Mbopha's whisper that set it in motion. The story of Mbopha kaSithayi is not just about one man's betrayal. It is about the fragility of power, the cost of tyranny, and the dangerous game of loyalty and survival. Shaka Zulu was a giant of history, his shadow still stretching across South Africa today. But even giants can fall, and when they do, it is often not enemies in the open who strike them down, but those closest at hand. Mbopha was that hand, and so history remembers him with a single word: betrayer. But perhaps, just perhaps, his story is a reminder that betrayal is not always born of malice. Sometimes it is born of desperation.